Welcome to the fourth and final module of this e-learning proposal entitled Clinical Trials, LDT versus IVD, a brief history. The objectives of this instructional content include providing a brief history of clinical studies involving human subjects, comparing and contrasting the impact of significant events in the history of clinical studies, and comparing and contrasting clinical validation from the perspective of an IVD developer versus an LDT developer. Let's begin with a historic overview of clinical trials. Early clinical trials can be traced back to over 1,000 years ago. The example provided here was in a comparative study on the use of a ginseng supplement. Another more recent example documented the advantages of willow bark. Still other examples occurring at about the same time in history included the awareness that citric acid helped in the treatment of scurvy. Let's fast forward to the 19th and 20th century and look at some of the events that have shaped today's regulatory environment when it comes to conducting a clinical trial involving human subjects. The approach to the practice of medicine was evolving during the 19th and 20th century, and in parallel was the design of clinical trial experiments. This era saw the first utilization of placebos, discussions on bias and randomization, and multi-center studies to leverage increased statistical power. These advances were balanced with several tragedies, including the sulfanilamide situation in the 1930s, World War II, and the thalidomide tragedy in Europe in the 1950s. The combination of increased awareness, a broader understanding of the scientific method when it comes to clinical studies, and the tragedies just mentioned led to several international agreements and regulations surrounding the implementation of clinical studies. The top 3 international agreements that come to mind anytime clinical studies are discussed are the Nuremberg Code, which came out of the post-World War II trials, the Declaration of Helsinki, which evolved from Nuremberg, and the Belmont Report, which evolved as a result of the Tuskegee incident in the U.S. Several regulations, standards, and entities have evolved from these international standards. The FDA has several regulations specific for clinical studies generating data for product submission. This could be a drug, a medical device, a biologic, and such. The common rule is the regulation that addresses human subject studies conducted purely for research. The OHRP is an institution designed to make sure that volunteers in clinical research are protected. The World Health Organization, drives by the Helsinki Accords, a standard commonly referred to as ICH E6, provides guidance to all conducting clinical studies, and the HIPAA regulations also come into play with clinical studies in terms of the data streams and the protection of privacy. Let's shift gears now and talk a little bit about how to implement a clinical trial. A critical path question in the planning of any clinical trial is, what is my study design? This question cannot be asked early enough in the process. Several key questions should be asked and constantly revisited as the project or product or research project moves forward. What is the specific study design? Longitudinal, cross-sectional, prospective, retrospective? What does my informed consent say? What do my case report forms look like? What are my inclusion and exclusion criteria? This is only a sampling of the key points and requirements of a study that need to be defined and locked in before you apply for approval to an institutional review board. In addition to those scientifically driven questions just mentioned, several logistic and business drivers should be addressed as well, including how many sites will I have in my study? What is my patient population? How experienced are my sites in conducting studies? Are the answers to all of these questions aligned with the corporate strategy of my hospital, business, research center, or other organization? When it all comes down to it, the management of data is the core driver for quality in the planning for any clinical trial or clinical validation. Questions ranging from how to put the label on the sample all the way up to when and how will I perform database lock, form an integral part of the protocol, of the project plan, and the success of the review process with the regulatory agency. A robust software QA group is a must-have for this part of clinical trial planning. Part of the planning associated with a clinical trial also includes the management of the IRB or EC. That's the Institutional Review Board if you're in the U.S., or the Ethics Committee if you're in Europe. These are the entities that all protocols must go through to gain approval to enable initiation of the clinical trial. They can be site-specific, which is often the case in large academic institutions, or they can be centralized. IRBs are essentially the gatekeeper for the conduct of your study. We're going to finish up the discussion on clinical trials with this high-level list of logistical steps. These are just some of the activities that are associated with any clinical trial used by an IVD developer. Let's keep that list in mind as we now revisit clinical validation and LDTs. One of the primary points in the argument that LDTs should be further regulated is the perspective that clinical validation does not occur as a result of clear regulations. While not in the regulations, many LDT developers do perform some level of clinical verification through the use of patient samples. Unfortunately, the statistical power and the study design are rarely sufficient to prove efficacy of the LDT assay. Regardless of that point, whether or not clinical validation happens in a CLIA assay will remain a point of contention. However, one point is clear. The burden on the IVD developer regarding the proof of the intended use via clinical validation data is much higher than that for an LDT developer. This concludes the fourth and final module of this e-learning proposal. I'd appreciate it if you'd take the related assessment, and then I'd appreciate your feedback regarding how we might work together to either use this content or other information in the generation of new instructional content for the AACC and its membership. Thank you for your time.